This is the car my father gave me. My father taught me how to drive at 15 years old. The first car he gave me was a red 1983 GT Mustang. It had T-tops that leaked, often leaving my seat completely wet when I would come out to it. The main modes of transportation in my high school were trucks, beat-up hoopty rides, foreign sports cars, and Mustangs. I was not a typical Mustang driver, and in many ways, I didn't cruise around trying to look cool in it. I had long hair, and most importantly, I didn't know, couldn't talk about, and didn't care about the motor or how fast it went. Back then, I really wanted to be led astray. I wanted love and sex, and desperately wanted to fit in and run away from myself. Having a car helped me to do this. I lost my virginity in that red GT Mustang to a off-roaming Michelle. My dad's first car was a 1967 Ford Fairlane. He washed this car twice a day and eventually sold it. He regretted this, and after passing through several owners over 30 years, my brother now owns it. These are various car seasons over the years. Out of all these cars, I can't remember one four-door family car. I spent much of my life crammed into the backseat of these vehicles. Car show vacations and cross-country moves. My father and I are both makers. My father rebuilds cars. He buys them, fixes them up, and then usually sells them. I make sculptures, videos, performances, and photographs. My father has 3 garages, one attached to our house, a larger one in the backyard, and another one down the road from our house. These garages are his second and kind of third homes. My garage is a cafe. My father photographs cars, car parts, and their engines. He prints these in triplicate at Walmart. I have 30 photos of my most recent sculpture in my iPhone. I never wanted to know how to fix and rebuild cars and never have. I was never forced to know much about them. If my car has a problem or breaks down, I call my father. Sometimes, I worry that I don't know how to fix them. That and not knowing that in some way that I'm kind of lacking. But my ambition really stops there, and I've never learned how to fix a car. I do know how to change the oil, but I have fixed a flat, but I've never actually fixed a car. These are some cars, these are some other cars my father gave me. Living in rural Virginia, at the time, I commuted in most of these cars daily, an hour to 2 hours. This was my first Taurus. We got this car from a used car dealership in our house. I loved how much room this car had. Eventually, this car broke down. I drove this car for a month before I didn't check the oil and the motor blew up on my way to work in the mall. It had red interior. I barely remember this car, though the color of it always reminded me of corny tuxedos you'd see in 80s movies. This was my second Taurus. The roof was dry rotting, and if you touched the ceiling, yellow dust would fall in your eyes. This was my first white Rogue. This car got on me twice before finally ending up in the graveyard of the cars I used to drive. I hit a deer with this car twice within 2 weeks, in almost the same spot. Eventually, I drove this car to Kansas City where I moved to school and could vote myself apart. Moving here got a lot of commuting. I drove this Mercury Sable after the Contour died. The other side of this car has a small gap between the door and floorboard where air comes in after the previous owner wrecked it by driving into an electrical pole. This is the car I currently drive. My grandfather drove Fords, my father drives Fords, and I too drive a Ford. My first notion of what a man is supposed to be like came from my maternal grandfather, Edward. He was strong, stoic, and manly. This is me trying on clothes in a mall fitting room. Physically, I take after Edward. He would always ask me and my brother how much hair we had on our chest. My brother John, 6 years older, would often win this, would always win this. My grandfather died in 1991 when I was 10. Now at 30, I'm almost completely covered in hair. I get my height from my dad and grandma. This is my brother, my dad, and me. My brother got the short end of the stick. My father's father, J.A., ran moonshine and went to jail twice. I'm pretty sure this is an image of outside of the prison taken from within a car. He passed away from a stomach cancer at the age of 33 when my dad was 9. My father rebuilt a 1940s Ford because his father had one. I remember one of the first stories of learning about my grandfather being in jail, which is a complete myth to me because my father's been was in the Air Force for 23 years and drank once, cracked a car, and has never drank or smoked since. So the idea that my grandfather went to jail twice for running moonshine still sounds pretty cool to me. And my father told me this while we were driving around in this car on a curvy dirt road in Virginia. He told me that when he rode with his father once in a car just like this, with the lights off, so they wouldn't be seen by the police. I never thought my dream car would be a truck. When I was a kid, my toy cars were everything. I remember traveling with them as my carry-on bag when we moved overseas when I was 10. I would spend hours on the floor playing with them. My dream car as a kid was a red 1966 convertible Mustang with a black top. I took this photo at a car show in Colorado when I was a kid. I would imagine beautiful women riding around with me in this car. My dream car as I got older became a family car. 4 doors. Now I imagine driving a family around and hauling artwork to art exhibits. I grew up in an era of minivans and SUVs, but in a household of Mustangs and hot rods. Recently, my artwork has grown large and very physical, which means the ease in which I transport my work has changed. I now need a truck in order to move them around. I've never had a desire for a truck, but now it seems necessary. A truck is the ultimate representation of masculinity. Truck culture seems to be filled with cocky, muscular men, rugged and outdoorsy, men who build things. This image is not me. My father has 2 trucks. The only truck my father can give me is a stick shift. Of all the cars I've driven, all of them have been automatic transmissions. I don't know how to drive a stick shift. I tried when I was younger, but I did poorly, and for some reason we never tried again. That is until recently when I had my father teach me. So I find myself at 30 years old, back where I was at 15, having my father teach me how to drive a car. I feel I've grown so much from that time. I know who I am and what I want. But yet, here I find myself, not quite got a man.
You won't start with the questions. Okay, you have comments on that. How about you? No, it's 2,000. One on the left is correct. Got to put you in to be able to start. And I got, let's put on the brake, let's put on the gas pedal. That's how, that's just my clutch right now. Alright. And you gotta get some gas. Slide out the clutch, I got every RPMs up more. Okay. Or do you want to watch me do it? No, I'll be fine.
It goes on for about an hour, so I'll stop there. Thank you so much for coming. And